Hello, everyone. Welcome to Burden's Global Diversity Awareness Month event, Cinema, Connections, and Conversations, presented by Novartis. I'm iN-Hale Williams, and I'm the writer-director of Burden, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our afternoon session today. A special thanks to Marion E. Brooks of Novartis and the entire Novartis team for being wonderful partners from Burden from the beginning. I conceived this film back in April 2018 when I was in a hotel and I was watching the news, and the incident with the two gentlemen in the Starbucks in Philadelphia happened. If you remember that time, there were a string of events that were happening, and I just had to say something and I had to do something. So I created this film specifically for what we're doing today. I wanted to create a film that showed audiences what it was like to walk a mile in the shoes of a Black man, or a day in the life of a Black man. Happens to be in this film, Bennett Lewis, played by the wonderful Nic Few. We're going to watch the film, and then we're going to have a fabulous, spirited discussion on bias and privilege and the different tones and themes that the film conjures up, moderated by CNN's Keith Boykin, best-selling author. So without further ado, I present to you Burden.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, baby.
You're living in poverty.
But don't be late.
Promise.
Your schools are no good. You have no jobs.
Take the ticket. If you want to dispute it, I'll see you in court.
Oh, I get it. Wakanda forever.
Looking for some diamond earrings for an anniversary gift?
I hated to even ask. You know how it is. Always harder on us.
I know.
Ooh, don't go all South Central on me. I moved your stuff over there.
I could be Superman, but
I appreciate you, but I don't need a mentor.
I could be Superman, but I don't know how. I could be Superman.
Question. Our first panelist is Dr. Angela Anderson. She is the U.S. Head of Diversity and Inclusion Strategy and Operations at Novartis. She's also the #1 Amazon International Best-Selling author of Now What? Get Over Yourself and Move, and the owner of Dr. Angela Speaks, an independent consulting agency. So welcome, Dr. Anderson. Our next guest is Asha. Our next guest is Asha Smith, and Asha is a practicing attorney and former public defender for the Legal Aid Society in New York. He holds 2 master's degrees from the New School and a JD from New York Law School. And while not in court, Asha is often contributing to various film and television projects in the capacities of entertainment law counsel, director, producer, and even as a professional makeup artist. So welcome, Asha.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have a little bit of a time delay here, so maybe some over talk over that. But last but not least is Nic Few, who you saw as Bennett Lewis in the film Burden. And Nic is an accomplished actor of stage, television, and film, a graduate of Brown University with an MFA in acting and directing, and an MA from Clark Atlanta University. For his starring role as Taylor in the film 90 Days, he won the Emerging Artist Acting Award at the Hollywood Film Festival in 2018. So welcome, Nic Few. And it's so good to have all you here, just to have this really important conversation. I want to thank Nathan and Jesus for providing us this opportunity for the conversation. Such an important film at such an important time. I want to start with you, Dr. Anderson. Can you tell us, why is this conversation that we're having today, why is this needed today, the conversation from this film?
So first of all, the film is brilliant. I called Nathan after I saw it the first time, and I was so excited. I said, "You did an amazing job." He captured so much within a small time frame. I literally took notes and I watched the film back to back. And so I think it's been amazing, and we've used it a lot within Novartis to start some very, very tough conversations. And so I think the film is really the perfect segue to provide people with perspective that may have historically not had it, And so it's just extremely necessary, especially in the workplace. It's been an amazing tool that we've had in our toolbox in Novartis.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Nick, I want to ask you a question. I don't know how much you relate to the character of Bennett in the film, but if so, explain to me what the similarities are if you put in your own life, how you deal with some sort of day-to-day daily biases and natural aggression.
I am a black man in North America. In addition to being an actor, I'm also a professor at Pepperdine University. And last week, a dean of the school actually wrote a letter to our current president saying that our educational system is indoctrinating people with false information and anti-American information because they're teaching about slavery and effects on people. He did this on our letterhead, and I'm expected to come back to the school and not be affected and to keep on as if he has not done something offensive and awful. It's our life. It's our burden. So I'm very well connected to my character, and I just hope this movie enlightens people and inspires people to open their minds and understand our lives. I'm hoping we can understand each other better. So, yes, I definitely have a connection to that.
Thank you. I would expect that to be something along the lines of the answer. Asha, you're a lawyer, practicing attorney. You deal with clients all the time. I'm sure who is dealing with the burden of being black men. What advice do you give to people? I know you're not giving social advice or legal advice. What advice would you give to people who are struggling with these types of issues? How do you as well deal with daily self-care in the context of so much crisis and conflict and consternation as a black person?
You know, literally every day is a different day, and there's like a whole arsenal of tools that you have to take out depending on the situation and depending on how you're feeling that day. You know, obviously, for me, I'm a black woman. I'm not a man, but I'm still black. And so some of the things that the character and Burden deals with, I deal with. And then I have brothers and uncles and cousins and male and friends. And, you know, I see this happening to even strangers that I don't know over and over again. And I know for me, I end up taking a deep breath before I say or do anything because it's infuriating. That's what I give. The first advice I give to anyone is to take a deep breath. And then you just have to see where you are and where you want to go. You know, some things are worth mentioning in the moment. Some things are worth keeping in mind so you know how to deal with that person, that situation again. And some things are just, it's not worth your time, right?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Now I can, yes.
Okay, great. One of the things that impacted me with the film is just the notion that we have to deal with these struggles, even in what we think are relatively safe spaces, with other black people, for example, with the jewelry store attendant, or in progressive spaces, like a yoga class, or what you think would be a progressive space. We saw an incident here in New York City, where I live, in Central Park, with a woman, Amy Cooper, who reported a black man allegedly for harassing her and called 911 when he was simply trying to get her to curb her dog, which was what you're supposed to do in the city. So we get blamed for things all the time, whether you're in an elevator, in the jewelry store, even in safe places in New York City or at a yoga place. How do people navigate something like that, Dr. Anderson, when you know that there is no place where you're fully able to escape that? You can't really get away from that no matter where you go.
Yes, so I'll tell you how I deal with it, which was kind of interesting because my lens is a little different. I come from a mental health space. And so The thing that I recommend to people most often is that some of these scenarios have played out in our lives over and over. And sometimes it helps to have a response ready, because I think the things that take us to the place that Asha's referring to, where you have to take a deep breath, kind of pause, step back, is when it comes out of nowhere, right? You never know when it's coming. And I mean, there's been an incident where my husband was asked to show identification in our driveway. And so even at your home, and now we're virtual. So I've had incidences where different panels and things of that nature have been hacked by people who are harassing even in those spaces. And so I think it's important, just like the movie said, to protect your heart, to protect your peace, right? To make sure that you have a solid circle that you can process some of these things out loud with, to have movies like Burden, where you can see yourself identified in your experience. Because I think a lot of times we know that it happens to other people, but opening the dialogue helps to deal and cope with some of the heaviness of it.
I want to ask a follow-up question for everybody, actually, with this one. I promised I wasn't going to talk about Ice Cube, but I'm going to sort of dovetail Ice Cube into this conversation just a tiny little bit. And this is about this. I noticed in this scene where Bennett is standing outside the jewelry store and the camera's looking at him and they ask, "May I help you?" He wants to come in to buy the jewelry. It reminded me of an experience that Oprah Winfrey had when she was traveling abroad in Europe. And Oprah Winfrey is one of the richest people in the world. And she still was denied entry into a boutique when she was abroad. I can't remember if it was Paris or Switzerland or someplace like that. And then it brought me back to Ice Cube again, which I told you I wasn't going to talk too much about. But Ice Cube said the other day that if Black people simply have capital, then we won't have racism. And I just think that's such an unusual thing to say. And so I want all of you sort of to sort of respond on that. Do you see this clearly in the film, that even somebody who's successful like Bennett is going through struggles as a Black person? Do you really think, do any of us really think that the access to capital will eliminate racism in our day-to-day existence?
I know for a fact that it doesn't, right? Because I am what you can consider a successful person, an African-American woman with a professional degree, but I still have my skin color and I refuse to straighten my hair, although I have nothing against it. I like to wear braids and twists and things like that. But you don't know what I have or what I do when I step outside my door, even no matter what I'm wearing. So, and that's been a consistent thing throughout my life. I would say the only place that I haven't had that issue was when I was living in Detroit, which is a predominantly Black city, African-American city, where that's not the mentality of everyone there. But once you leave the safety of home, then you deal with the rest of the world, and the rest of the world doesn't see you like your family and friends that look like you see you. And it doesn't matter what you have in your pocketbook or in your bank account. All they see is this, and they act accordingly.
Dr. Anderson or Nick, you want to join in on that one too?
Sure. So I'll jump in. My lens, again, is a little bit different because I'm based in the South. And so it's interesting because my husband is also Dr. Anderson. And so when we come into a space, we are treated like unicorns. And we kind of come in with the, yes, we do exist. And we know several people like us who exist. But people don't see that. I've had an instance where I was invited to an event, introduced by name, and the crowd looked around me to figure out who Dr. Anderson was. And so, even in that space with the list of credentials that we all have, there quite honestly are just some issues of implicit bias that it's very difficult to transcend. So I don't think wealth has anything to do with it. I don't think capital or education. Unfortunately, that's the thing. Society tells us check off all of these boxes, and then, you're an upstanding member of society. But even when you do that, there's still instances like the one I just described. So it's way beyond capital, for me at least.
And Nick, you're an Ivy League graduate, and I remember this a quote from the autobiography of Malcolm X, where Malcolm X says, what do white people call a Black person with a PhD? And the answer was the N-word. What's your experience in like as an educated Black man? Has that inoculated you from the daily racism in these spaces?
You know, it's so interesting that you bring it up. Attending an Ivy League university, I had possibly the most traumatic experience I've had in my entire life. I was targeted by the police. My car was vandalized by the police. I was put in jail, and to this day, I have no idea why. I thought I was safe. I did all the other things. I controlled myself. I wanted to live because I believed they were going to kill me. And I was going to school with people who owned oil companies, among the richest. I was not safe. And you know, that ideology, I think people get when they achieve a certain level of fame. But as my grandmother would say, keep living. We live in a systematic America that is systematically racist place, and we're growing, but I don't know, people. I feel like as much as we step forward, we step back.
There's still work to do.
History's repeated, and it's kind of scary.
Right. Yeah, Dr. Anderson, I'm looking at you on the screen right now. I see you're well dressed. You've got the pearls and beautiful dress and everything. And it reminds me of something. When I was in law school, one of my professors, Charles Ogletree, used to talk about how he would have to wear a uniform in order not to be harassed by the police, or to be just simply be taken seriously when he walked out the door. Here he is, Ivy League educated professor, and he and a talented lawyer, successful lawyer. He represented Anita Hill at the Clarence Thomas hearings. Talented, successful lawyer, and he even feels that unless he puts on his full suit as his armor when he walks outside the door, that he's not fully protected from racism. Have you had experiences like that? I know you're in corporate America. Have you had experiences like that in your lifetime? Do you feel that uniform is a part of the burden that we all carry, that we have to sort of to put on?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I can give you, it's sad that these incidences can come to the top of mind so quickly. But sometimes I actually purposely will not, be in the pearls and the corporate space, because I love to see how people react when they assume that you're insignificant. So that's what I call it, right? I want to see how you really show up with me. And so one instance that comes top of mind, I was out gathering some things for my daughters for school. And it was early in the morning. And so, it's when the store first opened. There were just a few people in there. And there were two ladies walking towards me, older ladies. And when I approached, one of the ladies clutched her handbag when she saw me coming. Now, I still was dressed. I wasn't in a suit or anything like that, but I was still well dressed. And so when things like that happen, my approach is a little bit different, because I see it as a teachable moment. And so I had a conversation with her right then. And I explained to her what that looks like and how her assumption that I had criminal intent was offensive. And so, I think it took her off guard that I had the conversation, but that has been the way that I've been able to kind of deal with some of the burden that we carry, is to just have direct conversations, because I shouldn't have to be comfortable just because you don't give me an opportunity to know who I am first before you respond. And so that's been my approach. That's helped a lot. And I think people have at least given it a second thought, hopefully, as they move forward and interact with other people who look like me.
That reminds me of something. I want to go back real quick to you, Nick, and then I want to follow up with something for you, Asha. This whole scene of being in the elevator where the white woman clutched her purse, similar to the experience that Dr. Anderson was talking about. I'm curious, because I wasn't clear in watching the film whether the Bennett character actually knew that she was clutching her purse at first, or if he knew that she was being racist only when she refused to get off of the elevator. And so I'm curious, how did you play that as a role? Did you play it as you kind of knew that she was that way, or only when she didn't get off the elevator?
From the first question, I knew where she was coming from. I knew to look at her because I realized she was afraid, and I'm a big man. And part of my burden is to not make her afraid. So, you know, that first question, you want to do? Yes. We not look at her, we not get in. You know what I'm saying? So that was a choice not to look at her, or to give her the assumption that I was aggressive or something after her. So yes.
Yeah, you know, I've noticed that in this city here, because of the coronavirus shutdown, the pandemic restrictions, only 2 people are allowed in the elevator in certain places. For example, my gym, and they have marked off spaces there, 6 feet apart from each other. And so there have been a few times in the past few weeks when I've been in the elevator, the only other person there is a white woman. And we're 6 feet away from each other, but usually you have the opportunity to have other people there to kind of make you, for, I guess, the white woman to feel safe. So I have this whole sort of burden that you're talking about, never even thought about it, of not making her feel threatened, which I shouldn't have to carry that responsibility, but that's part of the burden of being a Black man. So Asha, I want to go back to you on something you said earlier about being in Detroit, because that really piqued my interest. And I wish Nathan were on screen so we could join in on this part, but I just want to push back on that whole sort of different experience because you were in a Black community type of mentality. And I thought part of the story from the film was that even among Black people, that we can be our own worst oppressors. And that if we're not deliberately oppressing one another, that we can contribute to the oppression. For example, the bartender helping the Irishman who wanted to watch the football game. And the experience I'm thinking about, Nathan will remember this. Nathan and I were in Barbados together, and we couldn't get a taxi cab in Barbados. Wow. Not only that, we couldn't even get a chair on the beach in Barbados. And this is a Black country, Black people, they refuse to treat us equally. And so sometimes they were treating white people who were there much better than us. So sometimes I think we can be our own worst enemies in the way we treat one another. And that's sort of what I wanted to ask you about in terms of your experience with Detroit.
I mean, I don't negate that there's some hostility or some kind of self-hatred that exists in the African-American or Black community. Historically, those flames have been fanned through different, economic issues in this country. But I didn't feel that way in Detroit. I would say they do have class differences, but that most people in Detroit Black people that I know are happy to be Black. And they're happy if you're Black too. It doesn't mean they exclude anyone, but it's not a city where people don't appreciate their Blackness. So I grew up with that. And it does give me a different sense of self and the way that I view things. Like, obviously, I understand racism and things like that. But for the first, I want to say 14 years of my life, it wasn't something that I ever thought about until I encountered more white people. There were white people and other ethnicities in Detroit where I grew up, but Black people were the majority. It wasn't until I went to an environment where we were not the majority that I had, for lack of a better word, or exactly what it was, culture shock, because it was like, what? And that hasn't changed since I'm an adult, obviously, over 20, 30 years later. And it's just blows my mind the way that people that are not Black view us as if we're not capable, if we can't do all the things that we do. Like, if you look at our history then and now, we're incredible. And the fact that we have to prove ourselves, to me, is ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. Nathan just sent a message. I don't know if it's a private message or not, but he said that the Barbados experience was part of the reason why he included the jewelry scene in the film. I want to ask you, Dr. Anderson, I want to ask you, we're coming, I think, close to the final few minutes, but you're with Novartis, you are here on the panel. What did you hope from this film that this would help in corporate environment? How did you hope this film would help in corporate environments like Novartis to be able to serve as an educational tool? And how can this film be used in other corporate environments to continue that discussion?
Awesome. So, I mean, as you all know, a lot of times when you try to have these conversations in the corporate space, you don't necessarily feel psychologically safe to have the conversation. There are some people who feel like if they bring it up, it is a career impacting conversation. And so having a broad initiative around having difficult conversations eliminates that person from feeling like I have to be the first or I have to be the only one to say something. And so there's a lot of power in having a collective conversation organization-wide. So I encourage multiple organizations. We've seen lots of great dialogue, but also change in thought by using this film as the starter for these conversations. And so it just takes some of the pressure off. And once again, like I said earlier, it lets people know, hey, my feelings are validated. There's somebody else that understands what this looks like. And now this gives me an open door to have this discussion. So I would recommend any organization to add this to, their arsenal of the tools that they're using to have crucial conversations. We have to have them. It's the only way we're going to be able to move forward to a more collective way of working together every day. So it's been amazing. It's been amazing for us.
Thank you for that. And Nic, you're an actor. You play a lot of socially conscious roles. Well, not entirely socially conscious. I remember seeing you on a plane ride one time in the film, and you popped up, and I was like, "What is that Nic doing in this film?" Wasn't expecting that. But you play a lot of socially conscious roles, and this is one of them. And I was wondering, what exactly did you hope to achieve by participating in this particular film? Can you hear me, Nic?
Yes. Our first goal, can you hear me? Our first goal as performers is, often to entertain, but this is my ministry. So part of it for me is to educate also, to enlighten. So it's on purpose. Most of what I accept are socially conscious roles. I want people to be free. I want my people to be free. And I want to hopefully enlighten people that are a part of this system. They don't even realize it, to see themselves, to ask themselves the tough questions and perhaps change their point of view. Because as the film says, my burden is your burden also. There's so much fear going on, and that breeds hatred, it breeds violence, and misunderstanding and miscommunication. So this is what, I was a stutterer for the half of my life. And I prayed, I said, God, if you allow me to speak effectively, I will be a minister, and this is my ministry, so I take it seriously, please.
Okay. I appreciate that, too. I know you do. So, Asha, I want to sort of ask you similarly, your involvement in this, too. What do you hope is the message that people take from this when watching this film and having this conversation?
I mean, I want so much. I'm greedy. I want people to see the truth of everything that happens in this film and not deny it anymore and not pretend that it doesn't exist, and then move on and do what we all need to do. Although mostly I don't think it's us, but I'm biased, that need to do the work, right? We've been doing the work for 400 years. And I feel like if we're trying to move forward as a country, other people need to be doing the work. They need to see the film, recognize the truth, and don't deny it, and then move on from there. And yeah, Dr. Angela is all about having conversations and things. I think that conversations are good, but I'm not against.
No, to your point, we have to do the work. You're right.
Yes.
Like, conversations is just the beginning, but you're right. We have to be committed to having impact. That's first, and we have to make real change. We can't, you can't stir the pot and then not do anything about it. And so I think, yes, absolutely. So no, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's important that we have action and initiatives to back up the conversations after we have them. That's critical. That's the only way we move forward.
Yeah. Yes.
That leads me to my last question, which is for everybody as well, which is really this. what can we do to create change? We've seen the film, we've had the conversation, we're having the conversation, we'll continue to have this conversation, and most of us will continue to have these experiences on a day-to-day basis. What kinds of specific, concrete steps can we take in the future to create the kind of world we want to live in? Anybody can answer that one.
Okay, well, I was like, I guess I'll start. So, of course, like I said, my lens is more mental health. So I would say that it's important to make sure that you protect your peace. That's first. To make sure that you're honest about how you feel, because in order to do the work beyond ourselves, we have to be okay first. And so I tell people all the time, make sure that you're okay. It's okay to say that you're not okay, because we have to be at our best in order to do this work. It's difficult, but it's necessary. And so protect our mental space, have conversations. I would be remiss if I did not say, listen, if you need a therapist, get one, because it will help you process some of this heaviness, some of the difficulties that come with living in this existence, quite honestly. So that would be my first priority. Make sure that from a foundational standpoint, you are protecting and taking care of yourself so you can be equipped to do the external work.
Dr. Anderson, I love that, Dr. Anderson. I just wanted to tell Dr. Anderson that I love protecting. I love the idea of protecting your peace. I'm sorry, Asha, go ahead.
No, I'm shaking my head because I agree too. I feel like we haven't done that enough as a people. We always been trying to worry about other people, and we have to worry about ourselves and keep ourselves strong and keep our minds strong and our hearts strong and our spirit strong. And we've been giving away too much is what I think. And we got to stop doing that because it's hurting us.
Black women, I love you because you speak my heart, and you've always been there. Historically, you've always been there to protect us. And it's high time that we start protecting you. And I stand up. But again, to what you said, Asha, the day, Keith, that I decided to stop bowing my head and to stand in my truth and to stop conforming to the idea of somebody else was the day that I found freedom, right? I used to wear the cardigans and this flipped up collar, and then I realized it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter because I wasn't free. And when you're not free, you can't be creative. And when you cannot be creative, you can't deal. You can't. It's almost impossible to be malleable and to deal with things when you're stressed out and tense. Your mind isn't free. And so, along with my sisters, what they said, keep your peace, and you have to be free and create those spaces where you can live in this world, but not be a slave to it. Because I honestly believe that it's in our DNA. If I behave like a person that's cowardly and safe, they behave like a master. And I refuse to be that anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our ancestors fought too hard. They didn't want us to be slaves. They did all that work. They don't want us to be slaves. They don't want that.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I have to jump in here really quickly. Like, that's part of the motivation, this understanding that when you're tired, you still have to keep going because you carry that energy, to your point, Asha. We all do. And so we may get tired, but we can't quit. We can't quit.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And on that note, I just want to say I agree with that. All the messages everyone has communicated. I want to thank everyone for participating. I also want to add, support Black causes, support Black businesses, support Black art, support Black film, support Black theater, support Black projects. And since we're 12 days from election, I'm a political person, I have to tell people, vote. Vote at every election. Vote. Vote. Don't give away your power. Don't give away our power. Be a part of the change. And I want to thank Novartis and Nathan Williams and the whole Burden team for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. And thank all of you out there for joining us in this conversation. I want to bring back Nathan-Hale Williams, the creator of the film, for some final words. Thank you all.
Wow, what a great discussion. We've been having these discussions all day, but these are just a taste of what we have been doing with this film for the past year. We've been to Fortune 200 companies, law firms, community organizations, and using the film as a catalyst to have these kinds of dialogue, and these kinds of discussions. And so I just want to say thank you so much to this panel. Thank you to our moderator, the great Keith Boykin, to Dr. Angela Anderson, to Asha Smith, and to our star, Nic Few, for such a wonderful conversation. As you can tell, we could go on and on and on. And so the team has developed programs around the film that facilitate these kinds of discussions in uncomfortable situations. And we just have, like I said, we've been having great success with that. So if you or your organization are interested in hosting one of these programs or learning more about the full program, please contact us. You'll receive a survey after this event, and we'd love for you to fill out the survey and give your responses. And then also go check out our website, burden-thefilm.com, and sign up for our newsletter. So once again, and finally, I'd like to say thank you so much to our presenting sponsor, Novartis, to Marion Brooks, and to all of our panelists. Have a great rest of your day.